Well, we're here today to talk about the films of Bob Dylan, who's my favorite musician and, kind of my favorite artist in any medium. But we'll see if that translates to cinema as well. Hearts of Fire might have a objection to that. But I'm excited to talk about Dylan. Obviously incredibly influential and important figure of, the last half of the 20th century and to now, an avid cinephile himself and movie watcher, and, a guy that has, touched on the movie world kind of in one way or the other throughout his career, to, very wildly, mixed results. And I feel like not a person who's really known for his impact on the movies. Obviously, this year we had the James Mangold movie, A Complete Unknown, starring Timothée Chalamet. So the kind of Dylan and the movies conversation feels relevant. We'll maybe touch on A Complete Unknown a little bit towards the end, but I wanted to start with D.A. Pennebaker's documentary Don't Look Back, with no apostrophe, importantly, from 1967.
Wait, just as a quick side note, the song by Belle and Sebastian, like Dylan in the movies, is not about Bob Dylan, right?
Oh, good question. I don't know that.
Okay, hold on. I might need to confirm this because I don't. They follow you. The lyrics in the chorus are, and if they follow you, don't look back, like Dylan in the movies. Oh my God, no, it is. It said, "Don't look back, like Dylan." Okay, I see. For some reason, I kept thinking that it was like they must be referencing some classic film star that for some reason I just don't happen to know who it is. But okay, all right. So just right off the bat, we're talking about Bobby D, Robert Zimmerman, otherwise known as Bob Dylan, and already we're learning in real time. So
that's great. I love that. I love that connection. And I think that I think if you ask anybody about Dylan and the movies, Don't Look Back kind of feels like the strongest kind of,
it's definitive.
The definitive piece of cinema related to Dylan, and truly one of the great rock documentaries ever.
I would argue it's also just like a definitive piece of 20th century media. It's been romanticized and mythologized, and like not even just in the documentary itself, but the articles and the photographs, Time magazine.
And his look and the look of the film too. I mean, and then also, the contentious interviews, like lots of these things have been clipped and parodied, and, the kind of like music video that opens the film is innovative, with all of the note cards, which feels
we ripped
endlessly parodied and ripped off all the time.
Well, we ripped it off for Toyota Man.
Oh yeah, we did.
We shot. Just as a little side note, we illegally shot, on Mexican government property, on the border, just trying to do a Subterranean Homesick Blues type homage. But I remember that was some real guerrilla cinema where we took a rental car.
Yeah, we were really freaked out by this. This is a story we can tell in more depth at some point. But we drove across the border and kind of stole some shots in Mexico, and then had to drive back and explain that there were several canisters of something that were taped shut that the border guards could not open.
Certainly
we
not.
Shot on film. So the opening with all the note cards and Subterranean Homesick Blues, which was also, I think, recreated in a piece of media for promotional media for A Complete Unknown, also feels like endlessly parodied in cartoons and other things. And this film is very much the basis for the Cate Blanchett section of I'm Not There, kind of put through a Fellini-esque kind of filter, but like it feels like the baseline is this with the sort of shocking contrast of black and white. This film was shot on 16 reversal, I believe. That's why it's so black and so white. Nice. And kind of gives it this like otherworldly quality. And just his hair and his dark suits, and he's so skinny, and his fingernails are so long, and he smokes a million cigarettes, just like one after the other. So it's a very watchable thing. I mean, I don't know, Alan, you might know more about the kind of history of rock documentaries, but where does this fall in terms of kind of starting the genre?
I mean, I would argue that like it kind of is the playbook. I feel like there is a lot of, you kind of see this. You see a trend that sort of goes from verite in like documentaries about jazz in the 50s, and then eventually I feel like we start birthing what we know as the modern rock documentary, kind of happening more. I would argue that's like a post MTV VH1 sort of mythologizing rock type phenomenon that starts to emerge at the end of the 80s and the 90s, right? Because I feel like before then you have concert films, and
right, which this has some of, certainly, but it doesn't seem to be, it's not really the primary focus. It's awesome to see him play, and I'm sure that was kind of like the selling point in a way, but like the tour and just him existing in the UK at this point in his career as a rock star is what you're getting out of this. It's just so cool to see. And he doesn't kind of act like it feels like you're getting unfettered access to him.
Yeah. I would say getting into the nitty gritty of the doc itself, like outside of just, the loving it as an artifact, I would say that like you could have called this thing Portrait of a Young Contrarian, because like I wrestled with his depiction, and I like actually that in Mangold's A Complete Unknown that there's that line where she's like, "You're kind of an asshole, Bob," and like I wrestled with his depiction because on the one hand I empathize with the dilemma of being expected to explain one's work, especially to people who are asking from a place of hostility. But he was also kind of a dick about it. I mean, he's what, like 24 in this, or 23?
Yes, I mean that's very important to note. He's 24 years old in this. It's pretty crazy. 25 or 24. And you're right. Like it is so interesting that the kind of the hostility from the press, where it's kind of like, we don't understand this, and we don't think you do either, and we don't think your fans do, and we think this is all a big joke. And he's kind of like, well, what if it was a joke? Fuck you. Like, I mean, I'm just sort of predispositioned to this. I think he's the coolest guy in the world in this, and like, I'm glad I wasn't a journalist in 1965 where I have to deal with him, but like, still, I mean, I think that there's, as much as it is a sort of whiny teenager, trying to catch you in a contradictory words, I think that like his ability to sort of turn these questions around on themselves is just so funny and great. And like, these people just don't know what to do with it, especially British people that like, it just feels like they don't know how to deal with him not playing the game.
Yeah, well, he's definitely rustling their feathers. It's funny. There's a couple scenes. I mean, obviously, there's like the Time magazine one, where he's just like, it's like, you're not printing the truth, man. And they ask him, well, what is truth? And he's just, like, then they kind of catch him. That's the only moment they kind of, it was like a touche, where like he sort of pauses for a sec, and then he just goes back to just like, I don't know, man. a tramp vomiting in front of the Rockefeller building. I don't know, So it's just like there's that stuff it's funny, but I'm also just like you kind of are a little full of shit, but I like what you're doing with it. I would say there are like the interviews I sympathize the most with him. It's like there's the guy in his green room claiming to be not a journalist, but a student of science. That guy was insufferable, and I could see why you'd want to punch some square expecting your 2-minute treatise on the meaning of life, just at first, at face value and at first meet. And I get that he's
that
like
little twerp is such a dork.
Oh, dude. I mean, I would then see why it's like, weary of anyone trying to like get him. Like he seems to be more in touch with his fans who, though young, like connect with him emotionally rather than the older journalists that are trying to label him intellectually. Like, hence the anarchy label at the end, which I think is a really cool thing that, at the end they just call him an anarchist. They don't know what to make of him.
Yeah. And I think that like there's a sort of, if he was, considered this representative of the youth movement or whatever, which like, again, to his points, like all of those words mean something different to everyone. And he doesn't think of himself in that way at all. But it's almost as if they're using him to get out their frustrations of like interrogating the entire youth movement, of just being like, aren't you contradictory? Aren't you full of shit? Don't you enjoy the spoils of capitalism? Like, do you really see this kind of like astral plane of existence that's separate from, the one that everyone else does? And, they really are. It's as if they're kind of grabbing their own child or the hippie next door and trying to shake him and blame Dylan for this.
Yeah, I mean, it sucks that like, and this is such a constant in art, and it's these are the things that still feel relevant, because I feel like every youth movement is always going to be like held under extreme scrutiny by the generations that came before. And sometimes it's warranted. I mean, there's a lot of aspects of hippiedom that, yeah, we're kind of like full of shit. And then especially seeing the what the baby boomers eventually turn into, which is just another wave of capitalists. Yeah, you could say that some of it's coming from like the moment. But I would say that the idea that I like that what it does explore really well, and that I have my own philosophies about this, but I could see why people would lay this trip on Dylan if you were some like conservative Brit music journalist or just journalist in general. It's like the idea that if an artist is to diagnose a social ailment, then he or she must therefore provide a prescription. And I don't think that's an artist's job. Like
no.
Yeah, and that's a perversion that I think has only gotten more and more expected in the modern age, where like you expect your, like to me, I've always kind of felt like if you're looking to your favorite, bands or actors or celebrities for like effective policy prescription, then like you are part of the problem. It's like, I think the artist is to paint a portrait of the times, and which you have to argue that Dylan, quite perfectly captured, the civic
yes, but at the same time too, as he would always say as well, like it, he was just expressing himself, man, and when he wanted to write something else, he did, and then people got mad at him for that, I think that he, never really, like, what's so great about Don't Look Back is that it essentially captures in real time his first major evolution.
Yeah.
Like, and that is so cool to see. And to see him kind of struggling with it, trying it out, doing it in a hostile way, doing it in a, laid back way. Like this is him we get to watch him becoming, and like moving on to his kind of like second of many of dozens of eras, and it's an incredible thing to kind of get to experience, firsthand. And you're seeing that too with like the kind of like quote, rivalry or whatever with Donovan, you know, who is the I think Irish singer-songwriter that he kind of keeps getting compared to. Right. And it's so funny because, you know, he kind of like he keeps getting mentioned at the beginning as like, you know, the UK's or, you know, answer to Dylan or whatever, makes some joke about reading about him in the newspaper. And then he kind of shows up and is playing with him. And then there's the famous scene in the hotel room where, you know, Donovan plays him his new song or whatever, and Dylan is like, yeah, that was good, man, like good job. And then he plays It's All Over Now, Baby Blue to him. And it's just kind
I feel
of
bad
like,
for Donovan because he just
you
seems
are
like
not
a nice
on my level, bro. Like,
yeah. He just seems like a nice guy.
He seems like a nice fellow. And in fact, like in retrospect, Dylan has said that he liked Donovan and wasn't trying to show him up in that moment. But like, I don't know. I mean, even if he wasn't trying to, that was sort of the effect. And like, you know, his immaturity is part of the sauce and part of the appeal to me. You know what I mean? Like, I think that like his kind of fuck offness is part of the, like, I would think he was more full of shit if he did act like he knew all the answers, you know? And he's kind of spending this time pulling out. He was just like, I don't know, like, just because I wrote this song doesn't mean I have any responsibility to anything, you know? And I agree with him. I mean, I'm curious as to like what your, you know, the other factor of this is that this is, you know, kind of the one time in Dylan's career where he was sort of like, you know, famous, like it approaches Beatlemania, like what is his level of fame is here. And it's just so funny to think about him now and like what the, like if like any youth would give a shit about like this old man in a cowboy hat who's like mumbling.
Well, not unless, you know, some yassified actor portrays him in a fucking.
Well, yes, that's
true.
I
mean, lamenting like the Beatles casting. I'm like, are you fucking kidding? Like, I mean, obviously, I have many opinions about these like yassified like biopics.
Those are good actors, though, dude.
I know they're good actors, but I think we've talked about this before. I know we've argued about this before, but I feel like there's a problem that started happening. I can diagnose the film where this trend started, and it was like Walter Sal's On the Road, where like you cast all these like hot people, you know, to play these historical counterculture figures. And it looked, when I saw the trailer,
starring friend of the show Garrett Headland, come on the pod, Garrett.
But it's like when I saw the trailer, I was like, this looks like a fucking Levi's ad. Like, have you looked at the beats? They were a bunch of homunculus weirdos, you know? Yes. And like, so that there's that element of it where I'm just kind of like, I get it. This is how you print the money you need to make the movie, to put it in theaters. And, you know, because it's a struggling industry and you can't not cast hot people. But, you know, all that being said, I actually thought that T-Sham did a pretty fucking great job. Me too. I believed it.
I was incredibly worried and skeptical about a complete unknown. And I came out of it. I really enjoyed it and thought it was very good. It doesn't touch. Like, I'm Not There is a masterpiece and one of the best movies of the 2000s, and is on a whole other level. But as far as kind of like, you know, what we know of as the modern musical biopic, you know, I thought A Complete Unknown was good.
Yeah. Now this new genre of like the Wikipedia article in a movie.
Well, what's so strange about it is that I think in a lot of ways the reason that they keep getting made and keep making money is that like it's just another version of IP extraction, you know, like instead of Superman or Batman or whatever, it's Bob Dylan or the Beatles, you know, it's just a different version of that. It's someone's life and career in music instead of, you know, the comic books or whatever, but like it's not really that different.
I mean, I'm ready
it's sort
for
of like, disappointing in that way. And I mean, Bohemian Rhapsody is obviously one of the worst movies of the last decade, and Big time. Has wreaked havoc on all of us for making almost $900 million in theaters, which is insane.
Yeah. Well, all right. Well, tying it back to Don't Look Back, I will say what I do think is what I find interesting when they say that Donovan was like the UK remedy, to somebody like a Bob Dylan, I think ties into some of the things that that even like T-Sham, as Bob Dylan says in a Complete Unknown, where he's comparing.
Love that you call him T-Sham.
It's just that's my rapport with him. It's very one-sided. It's very parasocial, but that's
I think you guys would be friends.
But it's when he says Joan. It's when he's talking shit to Joan Baez about her music. It's like, these are like paintings in a dentist office, pretty pastels. And I think I actually do think that you could similarly describe Donovan, where you have the pastiche of what folk music was. And I love Donovan. I that album Season of the Witch is fucking awesome. I mean, there's a lot of records that I'm a fan of. Where Your Love Like Heaven and just everything off that record. But it is just sort of pretty whimsical music that's not necessarily about anything in particular. You have Donovan songs like Oh Gosh, where it's literally just kind of like they're these little poems. And Bob Dylan, he sort of starts he comes out of the US, which was in a different state of flux, and has things to say but doesn't necessarily want to have to explain why he says them, and it's just coming in like a bat out of hell. So obviously there's always going to be resistance in media to somebody like that. But more so than all of that, the sort of like the capturing this sort of cultural shift, I also just really dug the scene where his guarantee, the manager's negotiating his guarantee, which I mean, the inflation must be nuts on that, because $2,000 for a sold out concert sounded like such a fucking lowball to me.
Yeah.
It's like, you getting $2,000 a night? It's
I was curious about what you thought of the sort of aspects, or what you related to about the kind of touring and all the sort of politics and economics of going on tour like that.
Well, I think it's hard not to get a little nostalgic for the road, because it is just like bands hanging out in hotel rooms. That's literally what it is, and then I've heard of you, then come hang out. Obviously I've never toured at the level where there's people outside of your hotel freaking the fuck out, but there's basically it sounds like underplays. It's like, okay, you're doing your first UK trip, we're going to do a limited amount of shows, it's mostly going to be press, and the shows that you're going to do, you could probably do even larger venues, but because it's the first time and we want to make sure that they all sell out, we're gonna kind of do, I guess that's what definitively like an underplay is referring to. I
see.
Where you're going into smaller rooms so that everything's a slam dunk, and then you're
creating exclusivity and scarcity or whatever.
Yes. Yeah.
By the way, inflation calculator tells me that $2,000 in 1965 would be the equivalent of around $20,000 today.
Still low. Still low for Dylan. Yeah. Still low for Dylan.
I mean, Albert Grossman, I thought your game was better than this, dude. Like, what's going on?
Same. Yeah. I mean, but, again, this sounds like he's doing these, these are smaller rooms. And I would hope. But 20 a night sounds low for Dylan, for somebody in that moment of just being white hot and irrelevant.
Exactly. I mean, this is immediate. This is not long after the freewheeling and the times they are changing, and Highway 61 revisited. So like, this is peak era. This is just him. Post electric, but still doing acoustic stuff as well. Like, it's similar with the Beatles too, where you like go back and look at this, and like all of these massive changes are happening in such a short period of time. Like the Beatles went from like, matching suits and crew cuts to like, smoking opium in
with Ravi
India
Shankar? Yeah.
in like 4 years. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah.
So, it's kind of similar with Dylan, where it's like, people think of like, the Christian era as like mid 80s, but like it was actually late 70s, like this guy just really evolved so quickly, and then would, before you kind of even, got a handle on the new kind of persona and the new style and the new, idiom that he was working with, he would or shed that skin, and move on to the next thing.
Right.
We should bring up that there's, I think that there's a scene in this where he gets asked about, why he didn't play at Woodstock, which will come up later in one of his films.
Well, we should lay out. The thing we didn't lay out initially here is that we're talking about Don't Look Back. We're going to talk about Rollin' Thunder Revue, and then his actual films that we're going into here is Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, Hearts on Fire.
Hearts of Fire.
Hearts of Fire. Sorry, I'm confusing that with the Cut Copy song. And then Masked and Anonymous. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we might touch on some other stuff. Sure. Like, I wanna talk after. I wanna explain a little bit about Eat the Document, the follow up to Don't Look Back, and then this movie he made called Ronaldo and Clara, which is mostly has been recut to use footage for Rolling Thunder Revue.
Right.
And then, of course, you have like The Last Waltz and like some other No Direction Home, some other stuff that like is worth mentioning. But obviously, Masked and Anonymous is a fascinating thing that exists.
I'll give it that. You could, yes. That is an adjective I will allow.
With Don't Look Back, other kind of rock docs and even just sort of cinema verite or direct cinema, whatever you want to call it, kind of documentaries came out of that style and were influenced by it. D.A. Pennebaker, directed a lot of other great movies, some having to do with music and some not.
Sure.
He documented the Monterey Pop Festival, which is a great film and totally worth seeking out if you're into this stuff. And that features, performances by Jimi Hendrix and many other Mamas and the Papas, Simon and Garfunkel. It's pretty awesome, and also made in a similar style, although I would say that's much more of a concert film than this is.
Well, that's what I mean. We were talking about this earlier, but it's like when I think of like a documentary where you have the Talking Heads, not the band the Talking Heads, but the
not literally the Talking Heads.
Although that's for
that is episode. A concert film.
Yes. Yeah. But this idea that you have these people kind of recounting, these events, these important pivotal events, like. I don't think this really existed in the 60s. It's like, or prior to something like Don't Look Back, and even Don't Look Back doesn't really fall into those tropes. But like when I think of like a music documentary, quote unquote, it is just this verite stuff. It is Monterey Pop. It is like Jazz on a Summer's Day, which if you haven't seen, that's a amazing music or just a document of the Newport Jazz Festival in the late 50s. Like I think
I haven't seen that. I gotta check that out.
It's great.
And Pennebaker also directed Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars, which I think you like, which I have not seen.
And again, verite, just fly on the wall type stuff. Mm-hmm. I really do think it's like an invention of the post MTV and VH1 era, because when I think about, like Dylan going electric, quote unquote, I think of just like VH1 presents the 100 most shocking moments in rock, which the number one is the Mudshark incident with Led Zeppelin, but which they did not include that in the IMAX doc. No. But I would say that, like Dylan, like one of the most shocking, like that's the kind of shit that comes later down the line when like, baby boomers start getting nostalgic about their own contributions to art and culture. Like I think that that's something that, you know, kind of comes later, but I almost prefer this style of just like, no one needs to walk you through the story. You're just watching it happen in real time. And which I think this is a good segue to Rolling Thunder Revue.
Yes.
Which hold on. I don't know whether or not to tell you. I'd rather not fake the reaction. But I was going to say that there's something that happened after I watched this, and we were talking about it. It's like, oh, it's going to be great, you know, for this episode. And holy shit, like I was like, what a great documentary. And I think you told me, like, you mean mockumentary, and I was just like,
yes.
What are you talking about? And
so
okay.
No, keep going. Yes.
Well, I had no fucking idea this wasn't literally just a documentary of footage that Martin Scorsese put together in the style of the other Dylan doc you did.
Right. No Direction Home.
No Direction Home.
Which is a straight documentary. So we're talking about Rolling Thunder Revue, a Bob Dylan story by Martin Scorsese, which is a Netflix film made in 2019, and, you know, comprised of, you know, interviews with Dylan and other kind of musicians and people that were involved in this, you know, 1975 tour of Dylan's called the Rolling Thunder Revue. Now, I was excited for this. I heard it was happening. I heard it was coming out. It was kind of part of Marty's kind of like Netflix deal, having to do with like The Irishman and like kind of just trying to entice him and give him whatever he wants. So he kind of pitches him this thing. And I'm watching it, and I'm like, a lot of this footage feels like from, you know, Ronaldo and Clara, which we'll explain what that is in a minute, and sure. then you know, something about this feels off to me, like, you know, particularly with the filmmaker that they were interviewing, because I could tell that the supposed filmmaker that shot the footage we're watching from the tour, and there was, you know, a lot of footage I could tell was from Ronaldo and Clara, which I knew for a fact that Dylan directed himself. And then while I'm watching it, I'm looking up who this filmmaker guy is, and then and I can't find anything on him. And then towards the end of the film, they interview a little known congressman named Tanner.
I thought he legitimately was I was just like, I recognize that actor. He was in Manhattan and a bunch of Altman stuff. And then it was like, fuck me. As somebody that hasn't seen Tanner 88, okay, explain to us what that is. Because that was when I was like...
So this film is so crazy. You have to explain like so much shit. So the point being is that Rolling Thunder Revue, Bob Dylan story by Martin Scorsese is largely true, but much of it is fake on purpose. The filmmaker is fake. The Sharon Stone stuff is fake. And the and then obviously the congressman played by Michael Murphy is fake. So in 1988, in 1988, yeah, and Alan was gagged. He had no fucking idea. He thought Michael Murphy ran for Congress after, you know, acting in Altman and PTA movies. And he thought that Sharon Stone was on this tour as a teenager.
Yes.
So in 1988, Robert Altman made a miniseries called Tanner 88 that stars the actor Michael Murphy, who is in like Manhattan and he's in Nashville. You know, he plays Julianne Moore's psychiatrist in Magnolia, in like a very obviously Altman homage from PTA.
Sure.
He's a great actor. And Tanner 88 is a mockumentary as well that Altman shot, you know, during the presidential primary of 1988, and like includes a bunch of real figures, you know, like him kind of interacting at real events in like New Hampshire and like other things like that. Cynthia Nixon plays his daughter in an early role. It's great. It's a great little Altman kind of curio. It's written by Gary Trudeau. And then, you know, in the mid 2000s.
Any relation to Justin Trudeau? Is that a fellow political?
I don't think so. I think it's a different guy.
Okay.
He was like a cartoonist, and he created Doonesbury. That's interesting.
Well, see, I'll just say Altman is like I've seen a lot, but not enough. So that was a total blind spot for me. I recognized the actor, but again, was just kind of like, well, that's fascinating, and just was not realizing that like this was an elaborate ruse to betray my trust.
Elaborate ruse, much like, you know, that goes along with the kind of ethos of the Rolling Thunder Revue, where it's like, you know, it's a carnival. It's a circus show. It's a freak show. Like, that was kind of his philosophy about it. Dylan performed a lot of that tour wearing, white makeup on his face or wearing a mask. One of my favorite lines in Rolling Thunder Revue is when he goes, "Masks? We didn't have enough masks on that tour." And I was like, you know, that kind of explains the whole thing. And then so there's also a sequel to Tanner 88 called Tanner on Tanner that Altman made in 2004, which is one of the last projects he made. It was around the time of like The Company and A Prairie Home Companion, his last two films, which is also good. It's like on Showtime. Like, it might be hard to find now, but it's pretty good. And that's just like them. I don't know. I think it's like him running again or something like that. I can't really remember. But so weirdly, the Rolling Thunder Revue, A Bob Dylan Story by Martin Scorsese, is a sequel to Tanner 88, the Robert Altman miniseries. So it's a very bizarre, and like, you have to imagine little old me in 2019 watching this. No one on earth gives a shit about this or cares about it. It seems like a total side project to No Direction Home, which is already a pretty definitive piece, at least about that.
Yeah, which ironically we won't be talking about today.
I know. We can touch on it, but like, that is just such a just straight documentary that you should go watch. That like doesn't feel like, you know, we'd be talking more about like the content in it than like the cinema of it.
Yeah, exactly.
But so I'm sitting there by myself, or, you know, maybe with my partner at the time, and like realizing that is, you know, represent Congressman Tanner. and like my ex was just like, what? Like, why are you so excited? And like, to the idea to have to explain all, I was like, Marty, you son of a bitch. This joke is for like 5 people, and I'm one of them, you know? And like that like love Dylan enough to watch this, and then also will like get this joke. It's so bizarre. I love it. So basically, like, this film it's really clever because Dylan is credited as a director on 2 films. Okay. One of them is called Eat the Document, that you can watch on like YouTube and archive.org. That is a follow-up to Don't Look Back. It's about the next year's that's about the 65 tour. Eat the Document's about the 66 European tour. Right after which Dylan got in his like famed motorcycle accident. So the footage wasn't released for a long time. D.A. Pennebaker shot it. It was intended to be directed by him and edited. And then when Dylan saw the footage, he wanted to edit it himself. So he essentially edited it into an unreleasable,
like 5-hour
experimental film. No, so that's Eat the Document. So that is available, and it's like in like 50-minute form, and is worth watching. Unfortunately, it's not restored, or at least like we can't see where it's restored, but there's a few notable things about it. There's a great scene with him and John Lennon in the back of a limo where they're both extremely high on something that's not weed, and that's a kind of like iconic clip that you can find online. And then there's parts of that are parodied in I'm Not There as well. And then the beautiful last shot of I'm Not There, which is the only time we actually see Dylan in that movie, where he's playing an outdoor concert singing Mr. Tambourine Man. That footage is from Eat the Document.
Nice.
So that is definitely worth watching. And then Ronaldo and Clara is a bootlegged film that is not really available in any restored form, that is 4.5 hours long and was shot while they were doing the Rolling Thunder Revue tour. So that is why Sam Shepard is there. That's real. He brought him in to like quote unquote write that movie as they were making it. So who the fuck knows? And you know, it stars all his friends. I think that like there's a scene in Rolling Thunder Revue that's like that footage that's him and Patti Smith kind of having a nonsensical conversation.
Oh yeah.
I think that the movie's kind of like that. And like I've never sat down and watched it. I have a bootleg of it, but like it just seems like kind of unwatchable.
Sure.
And I think that, but like the footage is amazing. So it's like, I think it was really smart where I think the idea was, instead of kind of, you know, restoring and releasing Ronaldo and Clara, which he's probably like not into or doesn't care about anymore or is like embarrassed by, but it still has all this great footage. So they restored all of that and then edited it into this new kind of film, which, you know, it's smart because the footage from the film is somewhere between documentary and narrative, where they're acting, but they're all kind of playing themselves and they're all on drugs and like they're not. So like to present it as just straight documentary footage doesn't really make sense. So I think like contextualizing it like into this fake film was a really smart way to kind of like use the footage and like make something new out of it. And it's not like the the core information that you get from the film is about the tour is wrong or fictitious. It's just like adding all these little kind of flares to it that, you know, goes along with Dylan's, you know, myth making that he's done for his entire career, and his kind of playfulness with the truth, and his sort of, you know, mischievousness with media. Like, I don't know. It's an incredibly weird thing for two of the most famous people on earth to make, but like, I just think it's really cool. It like, when I realized what it was doing, I just was so tickled by it.
There are things about it that I'm assuming are real, which are the economics of it. And again, this seems to be a theme. And also, I mean, I will say, like, it kind of makes sense. Like, he kind of tells you the joke in the beginning, because he says life isn't about finding yourself. It's about inventing yourself, which is, you know, what we're talking about, like Dylan has done again and again in his career. But again, to me, the parts that, like, outside of, like, you know, the poetry and the wind of it, or whatever the fuck he's like trying to get across, we see this like theme of art versus commerce, right? And this one's more pronounced than what we had. I mean, obviously there's cultural themes. There's watching the fall of Saigon, American humiliation, divisive times, people looking for someone or something to believe in, which are ripped out of today's headlines. But this idea that like the bummer trip of the 70s after, you know, the flower child generation is this like, you know, this is where we start seeing you know, art as a business, and it's pronounced, you know, the tour stuff is pronounced more this time around because it was inherently set up to fail. Like, the rooms are too small, there's too many people on the road, and by the end it really starts setting in, and like acts start getting cut, and then you see two of the greatest living poets like having to schlep along as roadies just to justify tagging along, which I don't know, like, I'm just like, did that happen, did that not happen? Because that was kind of heartbreaking, where it's just like, yeah, dude, at some point you're like, well, you're eating the catering, you're another fucking bed on the bus, and you're trying to be part of this sort of like Dharma bum, you know, like, hey man, I'm just here as the cosmic zaddy.
Put your money where your mouth is and pick up that thing.
And it sucks. I felt bad for Ginsberg, but it's just like, yeah, dude, I mean, you can't just tag along on this. You know, I mean, I'm looking at this as
he's
like,
also such a little freak in that.
Of course,
Isn't he,
of course.
Like, such a freakazoid.
Yes.
I think that I'm pretty sure that stuff was real. You know, Ginsberg was definitely there. You know, Sam Shepard was definitely there.
Oh yeah.
You know, Patti Smith, like all of that stuff. I think that like,
and Larry Ratso Sloman, who is a real person. He was like a rock writer, because he also appears in the Coen documentary for Hallelujah.
Okay.
And he's the only journalist that like, you know, my hero Lenny was comfortable with interviewing him at different points throughout his career. So he's like, Ratso's like a real guy, and like, and Ratso, actually, you could argue that was like kind of the basis of Almost Famous, like that kind of rock journalist where he's just like, you don't want to get too close to him. But the truth is you know, Ratso like wanted to feel cool.
This guy. Okay.
Yeah.
That's
so
cool.
That's like,
yeah.
Larry Ratso Sloman. He's like, I believe it was Rolling Stone, who he was a writer for. And it's funny that he appears in this documentary, and that they then go back and create some fake subplot about, you know, Stefan Van Dorp, this like fictional filmmaker, hating Ratso.
Yes.
Because he has this amazing fucking line where he says, you know, like, do you think he caused problems for this, you know, for this film? And, you know, he just says, does a cockroach make trouble for the house? No, it's simply a nuisance, you know? So it's funny to me. I wonder how much of that was invented, how much of that goes with the theme that like Dylan just hates journalists. But it's funny that like Ratso dresses up, you know, and they go, you know, they go out of their way to make him, you know, not a villain in the story, but, you know, certainly someone that kind of comes off as a leech, or that someone that's starts impersonating Dylan, dressing like him. And it's this idea of the authenticity of the person making the art and the inauthenticity of the person trying to package it and sell it for Rolling Stone.
Yes, I mean, these are all themes that were also explored in Maston Anonymous as well. You know, which is essentially one of the main characters is a rock journalist.
Yeah, and my takeaway from that movie is just like, dude, Dylan hates writers. Like, for it to continue to be this echo in every document about him, you know, and that's its own, you know, that's its own sort of spark and magic is seeing these things clash, and how it manifests in Dylan's psyche, where he needs to just make a comment about it every time it happens. But at the same time, we're getting this period when, you know, the press is being very favorable to Dylan again. It's revitalized Dylan. They're saying like he's now in his like mid to late 30s. He's putting together his own magical mystery tour, and basically the consensus is that he's on fire. Like he's just put out Blood on the Tracks. He's got, you know, some great fucking songs from Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid. You know, knocking on Heaven's Door. I mean, you have some like there's that this is where my relationship to Dylan starts to sort of vary, because like I fall off after Infidels. That's kind of like and even Infidels kind of seems like a little, you know, spritz of that earlier magic and what slowly is kind of becoming his sort of like post-Christian, you know, born again phase, which they explore, and I'm not there, but like Blood on the Tracks is just one of my favorite albums, you know, and even though Self-Portrait, New Morning, and like some of that stuff isn't as interesting to me, Blood on the Tracks does feel like he captures lightning in a bottle yet again.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's a fairly basic opinion, I suppose, but like I think that it's pretty undeniable to me that Blood on the Tracks is probably the best thing he ever made singularly, and one of the best albums of all time.
Tangled Up in Blue. Yeah, you've got a lot of bangers on that one.
And then, you know, I still love, and I actually love the Christian period, and like to me that is a real sign of a true fan or not. You know, Slow Train Coming especially I think is an incredible album, and I know you're including that as well. But yeah, I mean, I think pretty undeniably, you know, the mid 80s were a kind of bit of a fallow period for many artists across mediums. I mean, we always talk about that with like film, you know, our hero filmmakers as well, you know, like, and I mean, obviously there are reappraisals of things, and like, and you know, no one's gonna like nowadays, like everyone loves Scorsese's 80s period, but like,
right,
you know, that was definitely considered a foul period for him, certainly for Altman, who like basically only directed like adaptations of plays in the 80s until he kind of came back with The Player. You know, I think that I do think that like Oh Mercy is a great album that's you know, part of his late 80s, but like, yes, like basically I think it's fair to say that like, this was the what was being captured in Rolling Thunder Revue is sort of the end of his, is the last period of his like total dominance and respect as, one of the best artists in the world until Time Out of Mind comes out in 1997.
Yeah.
So it's a good sort of like almost 20 years of a less influential, less popular.
Can I just ask you this? Is the song Joker Man about the font? Is that
about the
off of Infidels? The font, Joker Man is the it's the font they use for like sassy menus.
Oh, I thought you said the Fonz.
No. I don't think the fonts. No. The font Joker Man,
which it could be about Joker for all we know.
I can't listen to that song without thinking.
There's a Bob Dylan podcast called Joker Man.
Oh my God! Yeah, Joker Man.
That I'm sure we'll have to get.
Now I got to see. There's a Bob Dylan song called Comic Sans. There's a Sanskrit.
I didn't know Joker Man was a font.
It is a font.
So I'm not sure if it's.
Okay, sorry. I just had to get that one out there. But okay, so
yes. What did you? Oh, so in terms of what's real and what's fake, again, like I can't tell you definitively about everything, but there's a few things that are definitely we can point out. So, Stefan van Dorp, which is a hilarious name, is the European filmmaker who, in the film is the one who directed the footage. They never mentioned Ronaldo and Clara, or that it is like was intended to be a sort of semi-narrative film, which is interesting. So that guy is totally fake. Everything he says is not true. He's played by a experimental filmmaker and performance artist named Martin von Hasselberg.
Nice.
And I haven't seen any of his work, but he seems very kind of cool, and he looks cool in this movie.
Oh yeah, he's dope.
Like he sells it. Like
I imagine some German version of Stan Brakhage or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, right. But I think he's more than a filmmaker, a performance artist. Like he has so
he's good on camera, basically. He
has a partner named Brian Ruth, and they have a group called the Kipper Kids. I think that they're past kind of where they were really prominent, but I can see him being someone that was like either in Scorsese or Dylan's kind of orbit, or maybe both, because I actually think he's quite good in the film and definitely like sells that he's this guy.
Well, additionally, I will say that like as far as what's true and not true goes, what is undeniable is that like as a concert film, like this thing just gave me chills start to finish.
Yes.
Like the performances are incredible. And
they are. And it's and even when Dylan is sort of like, methed out on his with his white face paint, and it is like
methed out and white face Dylan era.
Yeah, it's kind of scary, but he's like really compelling on stage.
Great. He's amazing.
Like, you're right. Like the concert footage, and that's why this whole thing was worth kind of salvaging, because like the concert footage is so good.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. And then I was like, is that cool girl with the violin fake? No, she's real. Yeah. That's Scarlett Riviera, so she's like a real person. So yeah, the Sharon Stone thing is also completely made up. She was not there. She had nothing to do with it. All the photos are digital fabrications. But the funniest part to me is that, especially with a few of these things, and including Stephen Van Dorp, you actually have Dylan on camera talking about these things. So it is like him acting. It's not like, the point I'm making is that it's not as if they just did a straight interview with Dylan and then like put in these fun things as asides, kind of with his blessing, like he is participating in the ruse, like talking about Stefan Van. He's like, we met up with some filmmaker, some German named Stefan Van Dorp. You know, I didn't think much of him at the time, but he could shoot some good footage, you know?
Right. I loved
like, dude, like you're just selling that. It's amazing.
That's, well, I mean, I also want to say, I'm like, where's that actor in the movies he's actually supposed to be acting in? Sorry. We're going to go into the movies too.
We'll get there.
But yeah, I felt that, I mean, the Sharon Stone story was genius, where it was like, where basically she shows up with her mom, and her mom was a Dylan fan. And she was just some like feisty, rebellious 19-year-old that was into Kiss. So she's wearing like a Kiss t-shirt. She winds up meeting Bob Dylan, and Dylan on interview, he's just like, I asked her, you like that band? And basically she was like, tell some fake story about how, because it reminds her of Kabuki theater. And then I guess the punchline is just like, I don't remember Ichikawa vomiting blood, you know, or like some references some famous Kabuki actor, which is a great fucking line. Yeah, that of it I thought was genius. And then I also thought that like he plays her just like a woman, because he winds up like going on tour, like taking care of Joan Baez's, like steaming her dresses, or, you know, doing something like that, working with the costuming, and he plays her just like a woman. And you know, the part of the myth is that Sharon Stone's like, you know, starts like crying. She finds it so beautiful, and Dylan says that he wrote that song for her, and then he leaves, and then his bandmate's just like, he wrote that song like 10 years ago. Again, great. If you're gonna make some,
he says that to all the girls.
Yes, you know, Which again, I mean, I thinking it was real, I was like, this is unreal. This can't be. And now, you know, now we know. But great fodder for a mockumentary.
Yes, and then, you know, you also have like the hurricane stuff in there. You know, that's all.
Is that real? Okay,
yes.
Gotcha. Okay, because I remember the story of the hurricane. I remember that song, and remembering that it actually was about somebody.
Yes, for sure. And there's also there's a movie from I think '97 with Denzel Washington. Called the Hurricane by Norman Jewison, that I saw in theaters, but I don't remember if it's good or not. But yes, so all of that is real. You know, we should mention there's this great scene with when Joni Mitchell joins for a little while.
Oh man, she's great in it too,
and just has like one kind of song that they show that's really amazing. And also like Patti Smith is so, you know, her sort of introduction where she's, you know, doing this kind of like strange poetry and almost like, you know, proto slam poetry into a song. And then she's like on stage, she's like constantly trying to like button her shirt, and it takes her like half the poem to like button it. And it's so funny and weird. She's such a strange and compelling kind of presence, and
every time she shows up in a film,
love seeing her.
Every time she shows up in anything. Well, it's funny because in that era, she also catches a lot of shit. I mean, talking about like the zeitgeist and counterculture and prescription or diagnosis versus prescription. Because she also, like, some of the most fascinating footage I've ever seen of Patti Smith is Adam Curtis talking shit about her in Hypernormalization in the beginning, basically saying that like the counterculture offered no solutions. So it eventually, like, the 70s is where, you know, counterculture as political resistance went to die. And that, you know, this new generation of like punks or whatever was more interested in like the fame and being cool and kind of, you know, if anything, folding inward into it being this sort of self-serving community, which is not fair to Patti Smith. Again, it's just like the footages of her being this young, kind of feisty, maybe a little bit, you know, kind of naive sort of character. But Adam Curtis kind of uses her as this sort of symbol of like the death of the promise of the 60s. But you can tell that, like, yeah, I mean, in the same way that you might look at something like Don't Look Back, it's just like, maybe it is a little full of shit, but that's art as a...
Yeah, that's what you're supposed to be when you're 20,
yeah,
you know?
Completely.
Like,
yeah.
I mean, it's such a cool, just again similar to Don't Look Back. It's just like such a cool like
just this person full of fire, just
yeah.
like yeah.
And we just get to be there with them. And,
actually, also small side note: the the one Terrence Malick movie that I'm in for like 5 or 6 seconds.
Yes, I was going to say Patti Smith is in that too, and she's also good in it.
That's the only good thing in that movie, myself included.
No, so, yeah. We're gonna do an episode on that, and we're gonna do.
I love me some Malick. But
we're gonna talk about your scene with Rooney Mara, where apparently there was no dialogue that was usable on camera.
But anyways, back to Dylan and the Rolling Thunder Revue. And actually, maybe this speaking about actors and musicians as performers in narrative film. Let's use this as a segue to now talk about Dylan.
Good
the
segue.
Actor.
Yes, Dylan the actor. So he really only I mean, you could say he's always acting if you want to kind of go there, but the three kind of films that are most notable and that that are kind of worth discussing here are Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, Hearts of Fire, and Masked and Anonymous. Now, Pat Garrett is a great film, and
Sam Peckinpah,
Sam Peckinpah, starring James Coburn and Kris Kristofferson, another future subject of this podcast.
Well, break it down for us. Do you know the story of how Dylan got involved? Because I know he scored it.
Yes,
so and that's where knocking on Heaven's Door comes from, right?
Correct. So he does the whole soundtrack. And Knocking on Heaven's Door, one of his most famous songs, is from the soundtrack of this movie. It was made specifically for this movie. It's also used in a great scene of this movie.
Oh, God, yeah.
So I believe that this happened because, we're in the era of... a lot more kind of filmmakers doing stuff like this, right? Where it's like, a soundtrack as opposed to a score, Right. And, you have like, obviously like Simon and Garfunkel with The Graduate. You have Leonard Cohen with McCabe and Mrs. Miller.
Right.
And I think this was kind of, Peckinpah's idea to do that with Dylan. And so I believe that it started out as that and wanting him to do the soundtrack, and then Dylan has had a lifelong obsession with Billy the Kid. He's one of his favorite figures. He's obsessed with him, the myth of him, and all of this stuff. So I think as soon as Dylan heard about the project, he was kind of like, yeah, I'll do whatever you want for the score, but I want to play Billy the Kid. And Sam Peckinpah was kind of skeptical of this, and Dylan had never really acted before. Obviously it's a major role, and this is a later, Peckinpah is already like a big director at this point,
Has he already made The Wild Bunch?
Yeah, I mean, basically Peckinpah makes this, and then the next year makes Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia, probably his best film, and then he's basically done after that and like drinks himself. I mean, he made other movies, The Killer Elite, Cross of Iron, Convoy, and The Osterman Weekend, but like none of those are like touch the masterpieces of his
career.
earlier career. I mean, he essentially drinks himself to death after this. But so anyway, so Dylan is like pressuring him to cast him as Billy the Kid, and tells him at a certain point, like, Sam, you don't understand. I am Billy the Kid. Like, there's a part of him that sort of thinks of himself as a resurrected figure of Billy the Kid. So. Right. Which is also depicted in I'm Not There as well, where essentially the section of that movie that is indebted to this movie is the Richard Gere segment, which is sort of like in kind of has the concept of like, what if Billy the Kid never died and like escaped, that final shootout and was, on the run and living in anonymity. That's what that section of I'm Not There is about. And so, the film was written by Rudy Wurlitzer, who is a great writer, novelist, and screenwriter. He also wrote Two-Lane Blacktop by Monty Hellman, which is one of the best movies of the 70s, and also wrote Walker by Alex Cox. So he's like a very interesting... and he also wrote America by Robert Downey Sr., which... Oh, no, he's just in it. But anyway, he's like a cool, like really good writer, really, kind of countercultural figure. And, so it's an interesting pairing with, Bloody Sam, kind of reactionary, as Pauline Kael called him, a fascist filmmaker.
After Straw Dogs, right?
Straw Dogs, yeah.
I remember that, yeah.
Which she's like not totally wrong. It just that doesn't happen to equate with a bad filmmaker,
Sure, I actually the thing that the film of his that feels maybe more fascist is like Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia, just because it's because it's about a structure within this ranch, but. Yeah, I mean, he's not a feminist favorite. I know that about him too. No. He's just in general, Sam Peckinpah's a hot mess, and
yeah, he is. But I love his films, and
same.
And he's great, and I think that like this is a good example of why, because it's like this movie, which I think in many ways like you could consider one of like one of his more sort of normal movies. Like it's probably one of his most
and
famous
yet so abnormal.
Exactly. And like and so obviously like The Wild Bunch was innovative because of the violence, but this movie is so kind of sad and mournful and really about the death of the West, and is just a kind of like unexpectedly to me anyway, kind of beautiful and moving film. Obviously I love James Coburn and Kris Kristofferson, who are both great in this, and like, but it really is a sort of elegy for the West in a way that I think several people have tried to make, and some successful and others. I mean, obviously Unforgiven is that, but it kind of feels like Sam Peckinpah's like proto Unforgiven in a lot of ways.
Right. Well, all right, here's the thing. My reaction to it, because I like Peckinpah. He's not like a top of my list, but I do. Yeah, obviously, Tarantino draws a lot of inspiration from him. And I think where he's when he's at his strongest, it's creating these violent set pieces, like that was kind of, I mean, that's the stuff I still remember from Straw Dogs. But what I thought was thematically really fascinating is that like something I hadn't really seen in a Western, or at least at this depth, is the play on just how thin the line between lawman and criminal really are. And this is something of a genre cliche in noir, cop thrillers, and action movies now. I mean, you could say like To Live and Die in L.A., Deep Cover, Heat. It goes back. Yeah. It goes back to like Touch of Evil, and the list just goes on and on and on. But what makes it feel rich in this film is that it takes place on what is both untamed land and people, right? So we forget that, and maybe take for granted that the notion of quote unquote civil society was just a concept in the Old West that required guys with pieces of metal pinned to their coats to go around evangelizing everybody about this idea by force, for better or worse.
Yes, and I mean, and some of them don't even really believe in it.
Of course.
Pat Garrett, is just kind of doing, like, it's like they ask him why he's doing this, and it's just
a gig.
Like, he just got old. It's a gig. He doesn't want to like rob people anymore. Like it's as simple as that. So it's like, and Billy the Kid just isn't there yet. And it's like, so now he just has to kind of, guess my job is to like hunt down Billy the Kid now.
Even though we used to be homies, you know? Yeah. Well, Peckinpah, obviously, he seems like he loves leaning into the romanticism of this untamed world. And even like the way that like something that struck me was the way that Bob says the word lawman. Like it makes it sound like a foreign and strange word that was just invented. You know, it's like, what is the law? Oh, you're here to tell me what the law is. And I did think that I thought James Coburn I thought him as Pat Garrett slowly becomes so unlikable and such a hypocritical narc that by the end, like, kids are literally throwing rocks at him just for doing his job. Yeah. This movie has levels, man. This was something that kind of grew on me as I watched it, because it is like the stuff with Peckinpah stuff is that his filmmaking style at times is like really loose, and you kind of get lost in where you are in the story, and there's setups that don't always pay off, but the stuff that's the most important in the film, he always just nails. And that was something in the movie that it's just like, that is the death of the West, is essentially making way for people with money to develop this land, this untamed West, right?
Yeah, it was way more about economics than I remembered. Like I bought the new Criterion 4K and and watched the 50th anniversary cut, and I had seen, like, this movie has like several different cuts from over the years, and there's not really an agreed upon definitive one, but I probably hadn't seen this movie in 20 years, and you're right, like a lot of the dialogue stuff and the sort of like all these characters and like kind of what's going on with like the double crosses and like all of these things kind of I couldn't follow as a kid. I just kind of liked the violence, but like now it was really thematically and politically rich in a way that I didn't remember it being.
Well, just this idea that like someone slaps a badge on you and then suddenly you're turning your back on your friends and vice versa, right?
Right.
It's and that
and it's not just somebody slapping a badge on you. It's capital.
Yeah.
So capital slaps a badge on you to protect their land and wealth, and now I guess it's my job to betray my friends.
It kind of it reminds me of the Randy Newman song "Can't Fool the Fat Man." We should do an episode on Randy Newman, mostly how sufficiently parodied he was on Mad TV. But anyway. Irrelevant to what
and how an entire generation of kids, including me, think of Randy Newman as like the Toy Story guy and like don't realize that he had a whole career before that. So yeah, you can explain to me.
There is a Mad TV Dylan parody, because I think there was like a band that used to be on. This is so dorky, but anybody that grew up watching Mad TV in the 90s,
you love Mad TV, don't you?
I do. Well, I mean, I love Kids in the Hall, Mad TV, vintage SNL. Like I just liked sketch comedy. That was something that was like a big part in my household growing up. And Kids in the Hall is basically like my favorite band, like in the way that I think of them. They have the coolness of like some weird late 80s forgotten like indie rock band like the Replacements or something. But there was some weird band inside of the Mad TV universe called Corky and the Juice Pigs, and the guy like the comedian
Corky and the Juice Pigs.
It was fucking stupid. Yeah. In hindsight, yeah. I mean, whatever. I was like 11 or something, but I remember that the guy had like a Comedy Central Presents, like his own, because that used to be what would break you in stand up, was like, oh, you got a Comedy Central Presents like half hour. And he did this whole bit about like all the artists that didn't get to do James Bond themes, and he just kind of goes in and he's like, what if Bob Dylan did a James Bond theme? And he was just like, there's a satellite and a laser beam, everybody run, everybody scream. I just remember that making me laugh as a kid.
That's pretty good. Yeah.
That's sorry,
great.
Small aside about Bob Dylan and Mad TV. But okay.
Well, that's great. I mean, and we can mention too that in there's a great Dylan parody in Walk Hard, which is in general a great parody movie about the musical biopic, but they mimic a lot of the stuff from Don't Look Back in that movie as well.
Totally. Well, bringing this back to Bob, I do think he's one of the least interesting things in this movie, unfortunately.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, I guess I'll say this. Like, I think he works in this movie. I don't think he's bad. I don't think he like stands
it's
out
fine.
negatively. And I think Peckinpah. So I guess like the compromise was, Peckinpah wasn't going to cast him as Billy the Kid, because as we will find out definitively 10 years later, he is a bad actor if given conventional material. But he, I guess the compromise was that he plays, a member of the gang named Alias. He really kind of, he's kind of in the background a lot, and he, has a scene or two here or there. He kind of just plays like the weird squirrely guy, and he's kind of able to pull that off.
Well, because in classic Dylan fashion, like he always seems barely aware of his surroundings or what's being asked of him beyond playing a song.
But like Peckinpah is able to sort of use that as like sort of turning him into a really aloof character, where in the other two films, like, it reminds me of like in the other two films, he's very much like, Will Ferrell in Talladega Nights, where he's like, I don't know what to do with my hands, like on camera. Like, he just seems like he doesn't know how to like be on camera. It's such a bizarre thing. So yes, I mean, I think that like, Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, I think, is a pretty great movie. And, Dylan it's interesting to see Dylan sort of in that milieu, but he, doesn't do a ton in it. But I think the soundtrack is incredible. And, the soundtrack is like a great album of his and works really well in the film.
Yeah, I would say the score both works and doesn't work at times. Like at its most awesome, we get like knock knock knocking on heaven's door, when that dude's like bleeding out on the lake. And the opening ballad, which echoes throughout the film. But there are definitely scenes where a ballad wouldn't work tonally and needed something like more traditional score, right?
I see what you mean.
Which is fine. I mean, this is a product of the 70s. There's a lot of strange sort of score choices in films of that era where they haven't quite figured out how to marry these two forms. But again, what is good about it is like, A++, and I will say, last thing I'll say is that I love that he's a knife thrower because it feels on brand with his weird, like, carny lore.
Yes, exactly.
In the scene where his life is spared, makes no sense, but okay. I'm down to see a movie where another actor musician acts circles around the other actor trying to be the other musician trying to be an actor. Because those moments of them hanging out in just like medium wides is like just definitely special.
Well, it's funny because it's like Kristofferson, worships Dylan and like, but like he has to, play dominant to him in this movie, and also you're right, is such a better actor than Dylan is. Like, it's not even close, I think Kristofferson is like genuinely great in this movie. I think it's only his like third or so movie, which is interesting, but he had done some like full-on starring role. His first film is called Cisco Pike, and he's like the lead of it with Gene Hackman as the villain. So he had more experience, certainly, but he still wasn't like a veteran of acting. But I think he's great in it. And then it comes to now we need to jump forward, 12 more years and talk about Hearts of Stone or Hearts of Fire.
Maybe it should have been called Hearts of Stone, dude.
This movie blows.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. I was hoping it would be fun in like
it's not even really that fun.
No.
I mean, I don't really recommend it. So what it is but it is like a bizarre thing that like it's a Star is Born ripoff.
Yeah, it's like a paint huffed hard, like it barely threaded together a Star is Born, right?
Right, but it's an early script by Joe Esterhaus, who went on to write Showgirls and Basic Instinct and
wow, did not know that.
Yes, and Jagged Edge. He's like I don't know how much you know about Joe Esterhaus, but he's like a famous screenwriter of those times. Was part of the late 80s, early 90s, like spec script boom, where like I believe he was the first person to get paid $1 million for a screenplay.
Yeah,
and
I remember
like,
that he set some bar. It was for Basic Instinct, right?
I think so.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
And
yeah,
like him and Shane Black were like really big rivals, and because Shane Black, who wrote like Lethal Weapon and The Last Boy Scout. So yeah, Joe Esterhaus is like a pretty crazy figure, and it's just kind of bizarre that he had his hands on this screenplay as well. And he did write some great it's like the Flashdance, Jagged Edge, and then this,
for some
and
reason,
then Basic Instinct, Sliver,
Man,
Showgirls, J.
Can we talk about why do all these rock films in the like late 70s and 80s have such terrible music? Literally every single one. Even Streets of Fire, I'm just like, I love that movie. Not great songs. It's whoever they would hire to do these.
I like the songs in Streets of Fire. I think you're wrong about that.
I don't know why. It's very rare that like it always feels like you've hired someone to basically go into their B-sides and find the worst ones.
I agree. The songs in this are not good.
Well, even the songs that Dylan's supposed to be him, and I don't know if it's songs that he wrote. They probably are. But
I think they are the exactly that. They're B-sides. Yeah. But it's like this was his fallow period. Like this came out the year after Empire Burlesque, which like I think has some I like that one's for the heads. It has some merit.
This is post Joker Man.
Definitely his and his dangly earring era. Like this is not good era Dylan. He looks so weird.
Yeah.
Like with his humongous blue eyes and that haircut and that earring, he looks so bizarre. And we should say this also was directed by Richard Marquand, who had just directed Return of the Jedi.
Oh my God.
And, yes. And then and Jagged Edge with Esterhaus, and then he died right after wrapping this movie of a stroke. And people say that part of it was that this movie was so stressful for him that he died of a stroke at like 56 after this.
Oh no!
So this piece of shit killed Richard Marquand.
It's
sad,
and it is a piece of shit. There's some good casting. I like that Rupert Everett is in it.
Yeah, he's all right.
As a fan of Cemetery Man, he's not. Actually, no. I should say I like Rupert. Everett.
I like Rupert Everett. But he's certainly. I just mean he's okay in this movie. Yeah. I mean, he's my best friend's wedding. He's incredible in.
And Cemetery Man, which is also what a weird psychedelic horror film. But okay, then so Hair of the Dog, the song that he's supposed to be famous for, objectively garbage song.
Did he write it?
We can fact check this, but I would say that like because they all basically sound like like a precursor to like Oot Scoot and Boogie or the Chattanooga Hoochie Coochie, just the worst kinds of the songs I associate with theme parks in the early 90s, like Six Flags Fiesta Texas or something, where it's just like, oh, when the houses are rocking and don't bother knocking, just garbage. Achy breaky heart, that kind of shit. I'm like, why do these Dylan songs sound like like these like kind of corporate like bar rock country songs? But anyway, okay, so we're going. It's funny that all right, a couple of things that stood out to me because we know the plot. Or do you want to walk us through a quick recap of the plot? Well,
it literally is a fucking Star is Born. Like it's Fiona, who I didn't really know who that was before this. Maybe you do. I guess she's a singer as well.
No idea. Okay. Never heard of her.
Yeah,
fake
she's
news.
She's also awful in this too. Yeah, she's a singer. She was a sort of, I think, had something of a career, but she made a few albums in the 80s and then one in the 90s and one in 2011. So I think she kind of like had seems like it's sort of a one-hit wonder type person. She had a self-titled debut in 85.
Right.
And so, whatever. She's like a bar singer. Dylan is a famous musician.
He goes back
kind
home,
of a recluse.
Right? He's like
and you know, they meet and he starts mentoring her, and then, you know, Rupert Everett is this like very current famous musician, and
James
him
Colt,
and Dylan kind of like fight over her basically. And
Billy Parker is Bob Dylan and Rupert Everett is James Colt, and he's like, none of these people, all their music is terrible. All of them. You have 3 characters within this world. You couldn't. I mean, actually, the only song I liked was the one that Dylan sings her in the end, where it's like. But unfortunately, the context is kind of creepy because he's just like, I'm not that much older than you. I'm just a little further down the road, or whatever that argument is, where she like kisses him at the end. And she's like, I'll always love you, Billy. And then she leaves to start her own, career as a rock star, to finally claim her own her independence as a creative voice, or whatever in theory this scene was supposed to play out as. But again, there's like none of it. The banter's so confusing, and it's like everyone who showed up to shoot every scene where the plot and lines should be happening did, but they just shoot something else instead. And that's kind of like what is mystifyingly bad about it. Like, I don't know what Billy Parker wants in this movie. I don't know if he wants the girl or to manage her or to make music with her or not. Like, that's why I laughed. There's a really funny...
It's like, why did he do this? Like, that, it's just like, just imagining him showing up to set every day and like getting the little sides and like waiting in his trailer for the lighting to be ready and like all this stuff. It's just like, why the fuck did he do this? Like, I guess someone convinced him that like it would be a good idea to have his Star is Born, you know, after.
That's what I mean. Did he still have the same manager at that point? What's the guy's name? I forget.
Albert. It might be between the 2 famous managers. So like Albert Grossman, it was the manager who like basically discovered him.
Yeah.
And then you know, is depicted in Don't Look Back and was around for a while. And then, of course, like, you know, got fired over like embezzling his money and shit like that.
As they tend to do.
Always happens. And then later in his career, and he is still currently with this guy Jeff Rosen, who you'll hear about a lot whenever you talk. It's like that, like getting the blessing from him was how I'm Not There got made. Same with A Complete Unknown. Same with Masked and Anonymous. Like he's like the guy now and has been for like over 20 years. So this might be like between the 2 of them. So maybe he's just getting bad advice.
Somebody told him. I mean, that's why I laugh so hard when he says
he's also awful in the movie. Like, he's so awkward. He can't like convey anything. He has no chemistry with her.
Well, that's why I laugh so hard when he says that line. Ah, shit, I love you. Like it's almost like he forgot to say that. That's like that. Oh, right, that's the purpose of this scene. And then he drives off or whatever. But like, no chemistry, none.
No, none at all. It's such a bizarre artifact. It's not really available. I think you can. I sent you a file I got, but like it's just a VHS rip or whatever, but it will never be restored. Like it's not.
I don't think he want. Yeah.
It's not interesting enough, and it's not even that it's so bad that it's good. It's just kind of nothing, you know. And there is really thought one with weird the pedigree line involved. Yeah. Like again, the fact that it was made by like real filmmakers and screenwriters, it just makes it all the more bizarre that like it's so barely a movie.
Yeah, there's actually there's 2 little things I noticed. That like one, Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid is on a marquee in the background of a shot when they're like driving down a theater. So there's obviously there's that. And then the other thing.
So does Bob Dylan exist in the world of Hearts of Fire?
Yes,
but did Bob Dylan and Billy Parker ever interact?
I'm not going there with the lore. I'm assuming that, or in this world, Billy Parker acted as Alias in Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid.
Right, good question
as well. But the only thing that does reflect strangely on the real world is that there's a line in it about like, do rock stars win Nobel Prizes?
Yes,
which
yes,
was
yes,
weird
yes.
in this total dog shit movie. A strange prophetic line.
And I'm curious as to, yeah, like, talk more about your feelings on the music of it, and like, how would you go about writing fake music for a fake rock star?
I mean,
Like,
look,
I've always wondered that, where it's like, how do you do that, where you're like making a song that like is undeniably a hit, like for the narrative purposes of a movie, like something like Shallow in the New Star Is Born. Like, I mean, say, I don't know how you feel about that movie or that song, but like, to me, it's pretty undeniable that it like you believe it would be a hit.
I think we were arguing about that movie, and you were just like, I think you told me I've never written anything half as good as that. What is that song, Shallow, or something? It's like, or you said something like you write like. You write a Shallow or something.
To you? I was like, yes, right. Like, you try it.
Which was a funny, touche, sir. One day I will, motherfucker. And it is a great song. It actually is a great song. It
does sound like me.
Yeah. But my only, in the context of when we were arguing about that movie, because I think, we had freshly seen it, and it was just that, like, I guess that Cooper was supposed to be such a musical genius that from hearing it once drunk in a parking lot at 4 a.m, the next day he had already figured out what the chords and the arrangements and everything would be, which for me was a stretch. But again, it's a movie, and the song was written by Lady Gaga. And in this case, I doubt that these songs were written by Dylan. And I would have almost said, if you had to do this, I can't believe that you have two actual working musicians that, are in this movie, and they can't drum up, anything decent, to put on stage, because they're having to perform these songs. And then the James Colt character, he has his own set of songs, and they're basically just sort of these middle of the road kind of new wave type songs. You don't get the sense that any of the characters has a specific thing that their art is supposed to be about, or what their musical genres are, or what their interests are, and why they write it. Like, we get this weird shoehorned, there's like to me, that felt kind of ripped out of that movie Durfan, where there's the blind girl,
Durfan?
Oh, dude, we got to talk about Durfan on the podcast, because it's a great, like, obsessed fan with like a German rock star kind of.
I've heard of this.
Yeah, it's it's definitely like a midnight movie, kind of vibe.
Durfan or
The Fan. Yeah. I should have just said that. But
I've heard of this.
And the dude's movie, the dude's music in the movie rocks. He's like in this weird kind of Kraftwerk ripoff, like just kind of very German sounding, kind of cold wavy band. But in this, I would have thought.
Will watch this.
Yeah. I would have thought that James Colt would have had like Rupert Everett's character. It's like, okay, what he's supposed to capture the zeitgeist of what's popular in England in the 80s. And he got all this, you could have, I don't know, get Phil Collins. Get anybody to write you a real song, especially if you have these genuine celebrities. Because, I mean, maybe it's just the VHS rip of it, but it looked and felt like such a B movie. I
just like, that's what's so strange about it. It's like you have a bunch of, it's like, I mean, it's hard to judge, I guess, based on the kind of VHS rip of it all, but it does, like, it feels cheap. It feels like no one gives a shit. I'm just surprised that, like, it's a bunch of people that, like, have plenty of reason to be somewhere else, and they're choosing to make this movie, and it doesn't feel like anyone involved wants to.
Yeah. Well, all right. As a contrast, then, let's segue into a movie where everyone wanted to be there so badly and tried their hardest to make a good movie, and at the very least made certainly an interesting one.
Very. I think Masked and Anonymous is a fascinating movie to talk about and think about, and there's some good stories about the making of it. It's such a sort of also bizarre artifact, but I think like is more worth talking about, because it was very much something that Dylan did want to do, and wrote himself with Larry Charles, and sort of birthed into being. So this movie is from 2003. I saw it when it came out in theaters when I was in high school at the Drexel Theater. I think me and my friends didn't quite know what to make of it, but sort of, enjoyed it. And then I just rewatched it to talk about it with you, probably for the first time since it came out. So 20 years ago. And it's also a very interesting movie now. I mean, it's it feels very nowadays. It's feels very kind of a piece of sort of liberal political cinema about the Iraq War and trying to engage with that and some kind of successfully and some not. But yeah, let's get into it. So it's the first movie that was directed by Larry Charles, who would then go on to direct Borat and other kind of big comedies, which is crazy. Obviously, this guy Larry was one of the big directors of Seinfeld, is kind of like talked about as like if there was a third, the kind of third most important creative force on Seinfeld is kind of Larry Charles.
Interesting.
Behind the scenes, he directed many of the best episodes, wrote a lot of them as well, was a producer on the show for a long time. So he was definitely a key figure in that, and then is an extremely key figure in Curb Your Enthusiasm. So that's kind of how he got involved in this. And I guess I was going to say,
were they friends? Like, why would they co-write?
So, and we should say it's the movie itself is kind of like a sort of apocalyptic or like post-revolutionary. It's sort of as if it treats America as if it was a third world country, kind of in the midst of a chaotic revolution, essentially.
Yeah.
And it's sort of
speaking of fascism, at the hand of like a fascist dictator, who strangely Bob Dylan's supposed to be like
his son. Yes. I think, even though the guy's only like 5 years older than him.
Yeah, I was gonna say Dylan looks older than him,
and like looks exactly like a South American dictator would look. Yeah, and he's supposed to be like his kid. It's very strange. But then, and then it's got this like incredible ensemble cast because, this was, and we'll talk about it, but like once Time Out of Mind comes out in 1997, which is Dylan's like late period comeback album and one of his best albums and one of the best albums of the 90s, is, he kind of cements his legacy then, like even if he had never came out with any other good music after that, like that album really kind of put him back into the consciousness.
He gets to have a third act, basically.
He won the Grammy for Best Album that year. Then in the year 2000, he wins the Oscar for his song from the film Wonder Boys, which is like a very good film by Curtis Hanson with Michael Douglas. And so he's kind of like very back in it, and like he does three albums of original songs in a row: Time Out of Mind, Love and Theft, and Modern Times.
I remember
all of which are excellent and did well, like critically and commercially. Time Out of Mind is kind of like the classic out of those, but like the other two are also very good and did well.
Modern Times was coupled with a memoir, right? I remember that because I was in high school. I think I read like a Pitchfork review of it.
Correct. So Modern Times came out I believe at around the same time that his first book called Chronicles Volume 1, which is his memoir of his first sort of 10 years in New York. And the first part of his life and career. He has not released a volume 2 yet. It's so far, he only released a second book in the last year or so, which was an analysis of a bunch of classic songs from like a songwriting perspective. So he's written 2 books. So anyway, all of this is kind of happening. Some of that happens after Masked and Anonymous, but he's very much like kind of back in the culture and respected and popular again.
He's got his Riz back.
He's got his Riz back.
Sorry.
So Dylan has been, something important to know about Dylan is that he has essentially been on a never-ending tour since 1970, since the Rolling Thunder Revue, essentially. And like, there's a great moment in the end of that film where they just like show all the dates he plays like every year, which I'm sure gave you a heart attack. And it's like, it's literally every year from March until November or whatever, he's playing like, I mean, you saw, like, what would you say? It's like at least 100 dates a year, right?
Yes,
like
consistently.
At least 100 dates a year, every year from 1975 to this day. Like, so a lot of his time is spent obviously on like tour buses and planes and like whatever else. And like, according to Larry Charles, like what he does on that is watch movies. So, you know, and he'll go through these kind of phases and like sort of obsessions, like any good cinephile like you and I, where we're like, okay, I'm going to watch, you know, 10 Fassbinder movies now. And I'll have like, now I have a good knowledge of Fassbinder. So apparently he was
watching
doing that.
Almodovar in sequential order, you know, learning,
there you go.
Learning how someone becomes a good melodramatist, you know?
Yes. Hell yeah. Fucking A. That's great. So I guess he was kind of on a slapstick comedy kick and was watching, you know, Jerry Lewis stuff and Buster Keaton and like a lot of kind of, you know, these great comedian, director, actors, you know. So he starts watching that kind of stuff, and he basically goes to Jeff Rosen, his manager, and tells him, you know, I want to make a TV show where a slapstick comedy starring me, and Jeff Rosen
the least
is like
physical.
Okay, yes, yeah. As we see later, he can't even like move on camera in any like way that looks like a human being. But anyway, so like any good manager, producer, Jeff Rosen is like, all right, well, who are the comedy guys right now? You know, they talked to HBO. They might have like a deal there or something, but like, and they kick it to Larry Charles, who's like basically, you know, running Curb Your Enthusiasm and like is a good director and a writer and a producer. And if you want to make something funny and, you know, you're Bob Dylan, like he seems like a perfectly reasonable person to get paired up with, you know? And, you know, Larry Charles, who's his own kind of weird guy. And if you've ever seen him, he like has this like long ass beard. You know, he looks like, you know, a member of like ZZ Top or whatever.
They look like kindred spirits in a way.
And, you know, when Larry Charles is telling the story, he just casually, you know, tosses off stuff like, well, and this was a period of my life where I was wearing pajamas all of 100% of the time. And you're like, what? Okay. So, you know, he hears about this you know, he's excited to meet Dylan. He loves Dylan. He thinks nothing is going to come of this, obviously, but you know, it'll be a great story. So he goes to meet with him in the back of a boxing gym that Dylan owns. Again, like Jesus. question mark in Santa Monica. And so they go into like this back little office that's like a cubicle basically that's like, you know, covered in cigarette stains and like all this stuff. And, you know, they just start talking and, you know, they start talking about what he wants to do. And it's basically that. It's a sort of like slapstick comedy show or series starring him. And he, you know, and he's like, okay. And so they work on it. And you know, he goes there every day. They write together for like 12 hours. You know, he gets to spend all of this time with Dylan, you know, every day. And they're kind of, you can watch him on YouTube and stuff. There's like good podcast appearances from Larry Charles. He's very like open about this stuff. So he tells a lot of good stories about working with him. And then eventually they kind of have some sort of pitch or pilot or something, and they go into HBO. And Larry Charles is wearing his and Larry. Well, they're gonna go pitch it, and Larry Charles tells Dylan, "You should come with me because if you're there in the room, they won't say no. Yeah. They're never gonna say no to your face." And Dylan like kind of agrees with that and recognizes it, and is like, "Okay, I'll go." So they show up to HBO. Larry Charles is wearing his pajamas, like he's always wearing, and Dylan is wearing a full to the floor black duster and a black cowboy hat. Okay, and these two insane people, walk into HBO. They meet with, I think, Chris Albrecht, who is like the famous head of HBO for a long time during the this is in the heyday of HBO. This is 2002, 2003. Like this is like Sopranos, Wire, Sex and the City, like everything. So they go in, and the first thing that he says to Dylan is, like, what was it like playing at Woodstock?
Oh no!
And shows him like one of his prized possession, which is some like Woodstock like ticket stub or whatever. And as our audience may not know, Bob Dylan very famously did not play at Woodstock, and that is talked about in Don't Look Back. It's then mentioned in this film eventually. So after that comment, Dylan just walks to the other end of the conference room and turns his back to everyone else and just stares out the window for the rest of the meeting. So and then Larry Charles is like pitching the show and explaining it and blah, blah, blah. And then, it ends and they walk out. And it's Larry Charles and his manager and Dylan and Jeff Rosen, and as soon as they get to the elevator, they're like, "Oh, well, that went really well. Like they bought the show, they want to do it. That's great." And then Dylan just goes, "I don't want to do that anymore." So they go back to the drawing board, and he's like, and basically Larry Charles is like, "Look, like that's fine. We don't have to do that, but like we do have a green light from HBO. So like if we want to do anything, we can just do it." And so then they start rewriting, and they start writing what became Masked and Anonymous.
Wow. Was it, do you think, I mean, because also it was Dylan's idea that he wanted to do a slapstick thing.
Of course, but like that was his idea yesterday. That has nothing to do with today. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so they start, they start writing Masked and Anonymous, and like, it makes sense in a way. Like it has all these sort of elements, like, it's ostensibly a sort of let's put on a show movie, it has
again more of his carny
Rolling
lore.
Thunder Revue. Yeah, it's like they're kind of circus people putting on a carnival. There's this sort of like metaphor of Dylan is this like outlaw that's let out of jail. It's a travelogue. It's you have all these characters that are able to kind of like he encounters, and they can kind of spout their philosophy, and it's all of this
a lot of great takes too. Like on paper, it's not a bad script. As I was reading it, as I was watching it, I was like, these lines of dialogue are great if they were in a play. I'm having a hard time like swallowing it as scenes in a film, right?
Totally. It's all very sort of metaphorical and highfalutin, and doesn't really work as a drama. It's not. It doesn't work as a drama. You know what I mean? I don't mean the genre drama. I mean like it doesn't have any like believable sort of stakes, or it's not really compelling as a movie. I think as a philosophical sort of text, it's interesting, and I think that like a lot, but then like the fact that it's just put in a movie, and you have all of these very famous people
who are dying to be in Bob Dylan,
who are dying to be in this, who all did it for scale, and are wanting to be able to say these lyrics and also like act and be on set with Bob Dylan. Like, who wouldn't, you know? And like, you have, I think, John Goodman and Jeff Bridges and Jessica Lange kind of having to do a lot of the heavy lifting on trying to kind of like make this a movie and like give the scenes something to play. And I think they, you know, do a very valiant effort. I mean, Dylan is giving them really nothing as an actor.
Yeah.
And every time they kind of try to make him, it's just very funny to me. Where they're like, I can just see the behind the scenes where it's like, I don't know, like, this is feeling a little stiff. Like, why don't we do this as like a walk and talk or something?
Yeah,
like, it's just like, they're just like, they're like, can we do something to make this more alive? You know?
Yeah.
It's funny. I think that the people that Dylan is, the scenes that he's the best in are the ones that work, that he's able to give something to them, are the one scene he has with Cheech Marin, I think, is like kind of works.
Yeah.
And then with Angela Bassett, I think, right? Like she, and I guess, you know, she can like act with anybody. And
it's funny you say that. It's not that he's solid in that scene, but the premise of the scene is like, I can't for the life of me imagine Angela Bassett having sex with Bob Dylan. This is just so awkward. I'm like, what?
You can't. But like, he has some chemistry with her, I feel like.
Yeah.
Because she's able to kind of wring it out of him. I think the Giovanni
she's one of my all-time favorites.
Scene, yeah, totally. Yeah. I think the Giovanni Ribisi scene is genuinely good.
Yeah. Because all he has to do is just sort of react as like, who's this weird guy on the bus?
Exactly. You know? And like, the movie is kind of like, when it's just doing that, it kind of works. I mean, and we should also say you have Ed Harris in blackface, regrettably, you know, which is maybe why this isn't talked about that much anymore either.
Yeah.
Although, I don't know, he's obviously like, he's playing a guy using black, like, it's not like tolerated in the, it's not like,
of course it's done to make a point, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And obviously when I felt bad for Ed Harris, where it's like, that's when he gets sent his sides, he's like, wait, I'm doing what?
Yeah, he's like, what the fuck?
All right, fine, exactly. Bob, fine.
And then also you had you know, Val Kilmer, R.I.P., who just passed away sadly. He has a couple kind of good scenes in this too. I feel like he's very plugged into the weirdness. Oh, speaking of, also one of your Song to Song co-stars. He's also just like you. He's very good in Song to Song. And I mean, it's, and then there's, you know, there's some performances
Wait, Val Kilmer's in Song to Song?
I believe so, yes.
I don't remember. Fuck, man. I mean, I watched the movie, but it was a bit of a blur.
He has like a crazy scene where he...
he's a producer. Yeah.
He's like on stage or something, and
he's
he
on
like
stage with the Black Lips. And yeah. I remember that. I remember because they shot that at Fun Fest in like 2012, something like that. But okay, I remember now. Yes, he is in the film. I remember there was a lot of press about these random celebrities at Fun Fest and South by Southwest.
Right, and also Austin City Limits too, right?
ACL. Yeah, that's right. Okay, so we got, all right. Let's go through the cast because it's a big.
The cast is insane.
Cast.
Yes, I have it up here. We have Bob Dylan as Jack Fate.
Yes,
which is a name and a figure that has appeared in other Dylan related things.
Okay.
Dylan, that is the name that Dylan, I don't know if he always does, but he has taken as a pseudonym as a producer of his own albums. So I believe Modern Times, which was, you know, a few years after this, but Modern Times at least, and maybe others, is credited as being produced by Jack Fate.
Mm-hmm.
So then you have Jeff Bridges, Penelope Cruz, John Goodman, Jessica Lange, Luke Wilson, Angela Bassett, Stephen Bauer, Bruce Dern, Ed Harris, Val Kilmer, Cheech Marin,
dude,
Chris Penn, Giovanni Ribisi, Mickey Rourke, Christian Slater, Fred Ward.
Yes,
like, that's pretty nuts.
And I forget that Slater and Ward are just kind of there as these, like,
they're like barely in, like Beavis and
Butthead. It could have been anybody. But everybody wanted to be in this Bob Dylan movie. I mean, that's the thing that's like fascinating just as a cultural artifact. Again, I think it's a good script, or at least an interesting script, and I would have wanted to see, like, I would imagine it as a stage play because it is kind of mixed. Like, the execution of
You're not wrong that, like, it might kind of work better as a stage play.
Yeah, because the execution of it is so lopsided. You have all this, like, A-list talent, but you're shooting on early digital, and you're also, you're most of your money's going towards, like, set dressing this dystopian world that you kind of constantly are sort of going in and out. Like the effort seems lopsided from scene to scene.
Oh, definitely.
It's
like
very
sometimes
it's
like
Los Angeles.
It's production design to hell, and then sometimes they're just like outside in downtown LA.
Yeah,
and like they called it a day.
Yes, completely. Yeah. So it's fascinating in that, and in that way, it feels kind of like some weird like IFC film core, early 2000s type production. So in that way, and it's funny now that early digital is such an aesthetic, like when I go back and watch like Collateral or something.
Now it feels like kind of a choice in like a good way, for sure.
But I'm sure that this was something where it's like you've got, 12 of like the biggest actors.
Well, yeah, and so they're shooting fast. Like I think it was shot in 20 days,
Jesus.
And like because I think these people are all taking pay cuts, and they're all like wanting to be in it and do it, but like they're like, yeah, but that doesn't mean I want to be here longer than 2 weeks. You know what I mean? So I think it was like shot very fast. I mean, I think that there's also probably some of the I imagine the musical performances were contractual. Where they're like, at least like we gotta have something in
with
here
his like Los Lonely Boys or like Rob Thomas Santana looking ass backup band. Like it was so definitively of like what I think of when I think of like a slightly modern Latin rock kind of, or I don't know. It had a very it looked like 2003 up in those scenes.
It sure did. It's very 2003 coded. Also very 2003 is the kind of like, Bush war political satire where it's like we don't kind of have enough distance from it to be specific or cutting at all. It's just kind of like, America KKK, like it's a third world country now, bro. That's about as deep as it goes. But it's a really interesting artifact. I actually think it's a pretty, watchable. It's a much more watchable movie than Hearts of Fire.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Like I think it borders on being like almost kind of good.
I worked at a movie theater when that came out. I was in high school, and I remember it was just like, or just hearing, it's not like people were walking out of it. Like it's a watchable film. It's fascinating. Yeah. It's tedious at other times.
Yes, and it is occasionally funny, and like it's smart enough to like let Jeff Bridges and John Goodman be in a lot of the movie because it's like, well, they can sell it, But again, it's like, man, he fucking hates music journalists.
Oh my God, dude. It's literally, no spoilers here really, but you see it coming a mile away. But yeah, like, he's essentially the villain. For some reason, of all the people in this universe, of all the horrible, of the dictator father, of the Mickey Rourke brother who's basically taking the reins and of all like the villains in this dystopian world, Jeff Bridges, the rock journalist, is the villain, is the guy who's like trying to annoy him, asking him these sort of like leading questions of just
asking him why he didn't play at Woodstock.
Basically, and he gets stabbed in the neck with the neck of a guitar. Like it's just it's very it's laid on thick. It's laid on real thick.
It is, but like it's just funny to me because it's like if you're Larry Charles, you're kind of just like, all right, how do I get anything out of this collaboration that like we could actually put on screen and like schedule and costume and shoot and there's got to be production design and like how do we like get this out of him in a way that like there'll be something interesting that we can put on screen. I mean, I think that's I think that's kind of my takeaway of it is that like I think it has some great ideas in it. I think it has some great dialogue and I like thinking about the things that the characters are talking about and dealing with, but I don't think it like I have no like emotional connection to it.
It's hard to do that because again, I think, Bob just doesn't, or just, like Bob Dylan doesn't, it's so strange to me that his initial impulse to want to do this was to make a comedy, because when he's not on stage, he's so not emotive. It's very difficult to kind of like process. He's always sort of been this very aloof character.
But a lot of his writing is funny. I mean, like a lot of the songs have humor in them.
Oh yeah, totally. And there's even, if I had to imagine now, knowing that this is originally going to be like some sort of like slapstick homage, there are visual jokes and little lines in it that do feel like old. It's like there's like the man eating chicken gag.
Right,
which is like, what? That comes out of nowhere. Very, very carny humor. And then it's like, what did the llama say to the leopard at the dice game? I thought you were a cheetah. Just there's just stuff like that where I'm like, all right, that's fine. I'm not mad at that. But again, it was something where like, Dylan's obviously a great writer, but it's the thing that would have been interesting. If he would have really just stayed acted as the Greek chorus of this film and not actually have been involved in the plot, I think it would have been a much more effective film.
Right, but it's also
you got to sideline him like Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid.
Want out of this, like he could have clearly just written a film if that's what he wanted to do, but he must have wanted the experience of being in a film. I mean, and it's funny because Larry Charles talked about how like he said that Dylan had no idea about how the filmmaking process worked at all, and like didn't understand about like hitting his marks, or that he couldn't just like wander off in the middle of a scene, or that they had to like do coverage or like whatever, which is bizarre to me because he had made Hearts of Fire. Like maybe he just like completely blacked out that experience. And even though that movie is like terrible, I mean, it was made by professional filmmakers. So it's like he had shot coverage before, like he had shot a scene before, but maybe he either didn't remember or chose not to. But yeah, I mean, that thinking about that kind of stuff, but also
that's got to be a little bit of playing dumb, like the kind of I think that's sort of the magic. I mean, for better or worse, there's a certain like Dylan's personality definitively outside of his art feels like he's really always just kind of holding his cards close to him, and like it's hard to really sort of say what he's thinking at a given moment. And I've worked with musicians like this where I'm just kind of like, like it's, sound check's over and then you're herding cats. You have no idea, like, it's like just someone just kind of, musicians just tend to just sort of wander in and out of the situation until it's the only mark they're going to hit is that they're going to go on stage and perform, and they're going to play we're going to play a set. But I could see that like there's maybe a part of him that because he's Bob Dylan and he can do whatever he wants, that it's easier for him to just sort of be like, I don't know how that works, or like if I get bored with this, I'll just walk off.
I'll just walk around.
Yeah,
exactly.
That sounds like the story of this might be a good close to the end story here, but did you hear this was a couple of years ago where he was like arrested because they thought he was just like a homeless guy? And he was literally just wandering. This happened. Yeah, it was a story from like maybe like 5 or 6 years ago.
Vegas or something?
He was like, he apparently like, after sound check, he just goes walking around like he's any, kind of dude. And I guess he got lost.
In Jersey.
Yeah, wow. And he had his phone. I guess maybe he didn't have his phone. And he was trying to tell somebody that he was, or like, I guess he was just wandering around somebody's front yard. And like they called the cops, and the cop came. And he was trying to explain that he's Bob Dylan, and this cop was like, sure you are. And but then sure enough, he's fucking Bob Dylan. It wasn't until he was taken in, and that, I mean, again, that must be the kind of thing where like, he's just, he must be just sort of,
I guess he was wandering around seeing if he could find Bruce Springsteen's childhood home.
Yes.
Wow. I mean, that is true boomer coded, of just course. Like walking around kind of inspecting the neighborhood,
sure,
like it's something my dad does. Thanks for listening to This Podcast Should Be Played Loud, created, produced, and hosted by Chad Harbold and Alan Palomo. Please remember to rate, review, and follow on your favorite podcast platform, and keep up to date on new free and bonus episodes at patreon.com/This Podcast Should Be Played Loud. Our artwork is by Robert Beatty, and special thanks to Marie Barty and Jorge Palomo.